Hello and welcome to the 9th episode of ASEAN Pacific Affairs. In this episode special, we are going to discuss the geopolitical location of Nepal between two ASEAN giants, India and China. My special guest today is Manish Jung Pulami. Manish is a PhD candidate, research scholar at the Department of International Relations, Southeast Asian University in New Delhi, India. He was Public Policy Fellow, placed at National Planning Commission Government of Nepal. He has also completed a fellowship in international relations from Institute of South Asian Studies, Sichuan University in Sichuan, China. He completed his master's in international relations and diplomacy from Tribhuvan University in Kathmandu. He is also the Gold Medallist of the subject for academic season 2018-2020. He has also worked with many research organizations and think tanks inside and outside of Nepal. He is active in writing about the international affairs in online media platforms and has published a journal article. His area of interest is mainly focused on critical geopolitics relating to the continental and maritime South Asia, along with the small state strategies. Welcome, Manish. Thank you for joining me today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to the program.
Thank you. Now I'm going to start our program with the famous questions. How do you define Nepal's geostrategic position and geopolitical situation between two ASEAN giants, India and China? And could you please elaborate on the geopolitical trajectory for Nepal and the geostrategic rivalry of India and China in Nepal, please?
Yes, certainly. Very nice question to start with. And certainly, if I have to describe Nepal's geostrategic position and geopolitics between the two countries, then it can be said that it is in a very critical geostrategic position and geopolitically vulnerable country because of the two Asian giants, China and India. So particularly, we can see that China and India are both growing economies, and China has become one of the most powerful economies in not only in Asia but also in the world. And for India, we can say that India is one of the highest growing economy in Asia as well. And talking about military as well, Chinese and Indian military are very much powerful in compared to other Asian countries, and very much powerful in compared to Nepal, certainly because and also they are also nuclear states as well, because they bear the nuclear capacity as well. And so it makes the geostrategic position of Nepal very, very much critical, because Nepal as a landlocked state, and Nepal is surrounded by India from three sides, and China from the northern part, and being a landlocked country, and having a very difficult terrain for development, the geostrategic position of Nepal becomes very critical and very much of a subject to study. And certainly the geopolitics for Nepal is very much vulnerable. If I have to say that the geopolitics of Nepal, then certainly it is very vulnerable because of the China and India, because of the growing economies, not only because of the Chinese and Indian influence, but the other states, the extra regional countries like US geopolitics inside Nepal. So one of the important factors that makes the geopolitics for Nepal vulnerable is the Indo-Chinese rivalry, because if we trace the history of the Indian-Chinese rivalry, then India and China have gone into war into several times. And if we see the current contemporary situations between the India-China relations, then we can see that there have been clashes in the borders in the Galwan Valley. And if we look at the Doklam issues in Bhutan, and the technological banning of Chinese apps in India, if you see that, then the Indo-Chinese, the Sino-Indian rivalry, or the Indian-Chinese rivalry has placed Nepalese geopolitics into a very much of a critical situation. Very much of a critical situation. Being between these two Asian giants, it has been very much difficult for Nepal to balance both India and China, because both India and China have been very much active in trying to influence Nepal, either politically, economically, or in other manner, So it's very much of a vulnerable geopolitical situation for Nepal. And certainly, if we trace this, and if we, in regardless to the Sino-Indian rivalry, then if we just trace Nepal's trajectory, the geopolitical trajectory from its days of nation building, then it has been always been in a very much a critical situation. Nepal has not been colonized, the British rule in India has been very much crucial in the 19th and the early and in the late 18th century as well, because the growing British influence in the Indian subcontinent, and the aggressive Chinese and the aggressive Chinese campaigns in the southern part of the China has been very much vulnerable since the nation building stages in Nepal. So one of our very much one of our king, if I say his name, King Prithvinarayan Shah, has described Nepal as a yam between the two states, yam between the two boulders, two stones. And if we look at this rhetoric, or if we look at this metaphor, then it becomes very much of a it shows that Nepal's geopolitical situation is very vulnerable. That between the two stones, there is a one yam. So yeah, so moving forward from moving forward its own identity of geopolitical situation, later British named Nepal as a buffer state for their own easiness, because of the aggressive Chinese coming towards the southern Tibet. They wanted Nepal to be buffer. Not only Nepal, the Himalayan states at that time, Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim, to be particularly in a geopolitical to be particularly as a buffer to be particularly as a buffer state. So moving forward, it has never been easy situation in terms of geopolitics for Nepal regarding India and China, Chinese competition and rivalry as well. Because and in this trajectory, Nepal has always been tried to keep its have always tried to have an independent foreign policy, and try to keep the balance between the two neighbors as well, and certainly, if we talk about more about this geopolitical and geostrategic situation, then the critical geopolitics plays a very important role of this geopolitics as well. And certainly, yes, the colonial past of India, and the colonial rule in India, and the Chinese aggression after the start of the communist rule and their expansion towards the southern China, it has always been a very much critical and difficult geopolitical situation for Nepal, from its nation building state, and from nation building times. And certainly the Sino-Indian rivalry, the everlasting Sino-Indian rivalry, may I say, from the past, from not only from the independence of India and the establishment of the People's Republic of China, the geopolitical vulnerability of Nepal goes beyond the independence of India, before the independence of Nepal and the establishment of the People's Republic of China as well.
What kind of identities Nepal have constructed because of these geopolitical vulnerabilities?
So yes, because of these geopolitical situations and geostrategic situations of Nepal, Nepal has created different kind of identities identities for itself. Let me start with so if we start with the identities of the geopolitical situation, the geostrategic situation, and the geopolitical vulnerabilities. I have already mentioned that our king Prithvi Narayan Shah, who was one of the most one of the kings who started the unification of Nepal in the late 18th century, and which continued in the to till the early 19th centuries by his predecessors and others. So yeah, he constructed an identity of Nepal as Yam. So Yam between the two boulders. I have already told that between the two stones, between the two big stones, Nepal is a Yam country. And later, Nepal was imposed an identity as a buffer state by the British. So British, for their easiness, Nepal was created as a buffer, and this identity was carried by Nepal. This geopolitical identity was carried by Nepal for very long period of time, and Nepal was time and again reiterated that it was a buffer state. It was a buffer state. Later, different people have tried to construct its identity, Nepal's identity, looking at its geostrategic position and geopolitical vulnerabilities. And if we look at if we go to King Birendra's mentioning of Nepal as a gateway to South Asia and Central Asia, which rhetoric is still carried by the Chinese people, and they say that Nepal is the gateway to South Asia. And later, his brother, when King Gyanendra became king, King Gyanendra became king of Nepal. Then King Gyanendra tried to establish Nepal as a transit state, So it also comes from its geopolitical or geostrategic situation. It emerges from the geopolitical vulnerabilities, and certainly, and in later days, Nepal had tried to become the bridge between China and India. The bridge rhetoric between the bridge metaphor in Nepal has been quite popular in these days, and Nepal has even tried and focused its development strategies in trying to connect India and China in a more peaceful manner. So this geostrategic position, starting from Yam, has traveled from being buffer to gateway to transit, and to the rhetoric or to the metaphor of bridge identity in this geopolitical and geostrategic situation for Nepal, because this identity actually comes along with Nepal's foreign policy, because different types of foreign policy has been adopted in the course of time, looking at different situations, and have created different types of identity in order to balance Nepal's geopolitical and geostrategic situation between the two Asian giants, which have always been very much influential and which has been very much critical. Let not me say influential, but critical in terms of Nepal's foreign policy and domestic policy as well.
Manish, between two these ASEAN giant power, what kind of relation does Nepal have with India and China, and how Nepal does balance the influence of these two states?
Yes, thank you. So yeah, first, we have always been saying that Nepal has a very much of a geopolitical vulnerable situation, and Nepal is in a very geostrategic position between India and China. But it is also a duty of a researcher or duty of a scholar to look at or trace back the relation of Nepal between these two Asian giants, China and India. Let me talk with Nepal's relation with India first, because of its location and being India. So Nepal is actually bordered from three sides. If you see Nepal's map, then it is in rectangular shape. So three sides have been bordered by India. So if you look at India's relation with Nepal and Nepal's relation with India, it moves beyond Nepal's creation, or Nepal's start of being a modern state, or Nepal's start of being a modern nation state, and before India's independence, and far before India's independence, because we have been very much connected historically as well. and because our histories are connected, our because if we look at the situations, then there was different kind of relations between the Indian states, from Marathas to Punjabs. Nepal has its relation, the trade relations, may I say, the trade relations with these states before its independence. And Nepal also used to have very small states as well, very small principalities, let me say, because self-ruling principalities, very small self-ruling principalities, they have always have had a very much of a political as well as economical relations. And if we talk about Nepal India relations, it is very much it is very much important to remember Gautam Buddha's um, Gautam Buddha's relation, because it was not from Nepal to China the Buddhism spread. First, it spread from Nepal to India, and it started spreading from India to China, if we trace its history. So yeah, so religiously as well, because India and Nepal we are very much homogeneous, because we are very much homogeneous in terms of religion and culture, because most of the majority in India is also Hindu, and most of the majority of the people living in Nepal are also Hindu. So it's not that there are no Muslims, but in Nepal, because we have different kinds of diversity. We have Muslims, we have Christians, we have Hindu, but certainly about more than 80% of the population is Hindu. So one being a Hindu majority country, it has a very much of a good relations with India religiously as well, because many of the pilgrimage sites for Hinduism are located in India. So yeah, particularly Nepalese people have been visiting India since very long, for pilgrimage sites and for the education purpose as well. Going to Banaras, going to Gaya was a one kind of a very much of a fashion back in the history for Hindu people to go and take some knowledge in these sacred places for Hindu. And culturally as well, we have been very binded with Nepal and India, because the languages are similar. It's not that Nepali language is very much similar to Hindi, but yes, but the origin of both these languages are can be traced to Sanskrit. So it projects Nepal's relation with India very long, because culturally as well we have very much of a similar culture. With the festivals have been same, most of the festivals have been same, because of this religious calendar, maybe the culture has been same. The death rites, or the funeral rites, or the birth celebrations have been very much of the same. The marriage celebrations have been the very same. So if I talk about, and political relations as well, it has been very much of a old one, historic one. So political relations, though there was a rule of British in India, British people in India, Nepal has had a very historic political relations with the East India Company as well. Though Nepal and East India Company went to war in 1840, which ended in 1816, and the Treaty of Sugauli, the Sugauli Sandhi, we call it, the Sugauli Treaty was signed in 1816, which became a very much of a landmark of the political relations between India and Nepal. Though Nepal was not victorious in that war, and because of that war, Nepal had to lose very much of its two-third of its landscape to British India, But actually, the formal historic relations, the political relations start from that point. But the political relations have been very much of a very much of a day-to-day affair with India, because before that treaty, the administrators of Nepal have had political relations not only with East India Company, in East India Company in India, but they also had some political relations with other states like Marathas and the Punjabis. Nepalese people have had political relations, no direct political relations, but have had some connections with them as well. So formally to say, the 1816, the Treaty of Sugauli has been the vantage point for Nepal to start its historic political situation with India. Later, during an adoption of the independent foreign policy of Nepal, far before that, Nepal has always been very much of skeptic towards British India, and went to war, as I have already mentioned. And most of the thing that Nepal started from after that was after that war, and after a few years after that war, and after signing of that treaty, Nepal had some Rana regime. The Ranas controlled Nepal. They have autocratic system in Nepal. They had have very much of a good relation with India, and many prime ministers visited to India, and then in that time, and prime ministers of that period had traveled days to go to England, and most of the and after that we have had after that we had our administrative systems derived from Britishes as well. We have had some like that, but it's kind of unique in Nepal. And after the independence of India in 1947, Nepal signed a treaty of peace and friendship with India in 1950. So it has been a landmark for the relation between India and Nepal. In this case, India and Nepal. In this case, after that, Nepal and India have had very much of a relation. Has been a very much of it. The relation between Nepal and India has been smooth, but it's up and downs. Nepal's relations with India has been always with up and downs, may I say, because there has not been a smooth situation always, because there have been lots of border disputes between Nepal and India. So it becomes a very much of a point of discussion, point of conflict between the two states, particularly. And there has been a very much of a debate between the water sharing between India and Nepal. And certainly it has been very much of a ups and downs, because India has also imposed blockade against Nepal two times, in 1989 once, and 2015 in particular. Nepal. But rather than these conflicts, let me say these are the ups and downs. But the relations between India has been very smooth, because we have been highly dependent on India. Nepal has been highly dependent on India for its transit facilities. Nepal is very much dependent towards India for its economic relations, for its economy, for trade. So overall, if we see Nepal's relation with India has been very much of a historic one. And we have a very much of a, because of the homogeneous culture, religion, language between India and Nepal. The historic relations has been very much of a better one, and political relations have always started far long before the India's independence, and before British rule in India as well. But formally, we can say it after the Treaty of Sugauli between between Nepal and the British East India Company. And after independence of India and signing of peace and friendship treaty with India in 1950, with Nepal and India in 1950, there has been several ups and downs in the relationship. But actually, the relations have been very nice, very smooth. The relations with India had gone through conflicts with border and water sharing, but actually the Nepal is dependent highly with India, and for trade and economy, and because of the open border as well, open border between Nepal and India as well, the relations have been, I think, because of the open border and the free movement of people between India and Nepal, it has, the relations between India and Nepal has it been very long and very smooth. We say in Nepal that the Nepalese India relation can be described. If you may not be familiar with this word, or you may not understand its actual meaning, we can say that it's the roti beti ko sambandha, that the relations of relations build up in the marital affairs, because the Nepalese people marry from India, and Indians also marry Nepalese people, and the roti means it has been always been that the it has been always been the reciprocal relationship between India and Nepal, that it has been always a reciprocal relationship between India and Nepal in terms of trade and economics. So if I have to conclude India's Nepal relation, it has been smooth, but it has been ups and downs. And in contrast to Nepal's relation with China, regardless to Nepal, then if I have to say Nepal's relation with China, then Nepal's relationship with China also date back very far long, because there has been trade between Nepal and Tibet, not with particularly in the mainland China, but Nepal's trade with Tibet has been very much of a historic. And our princess Bhrikuti has been married to the Chinese emperor as well, from Nepal, from Nepalese princess married to the Chinese emperor. Nepalese architects traveling to Nepalese architects traveling to China to build stupas and different monuments, which is still preserved in China. Shows that we have a very much of a long historic relationship with India, particularly with Tibet, because the trade with Tibet was very much of a par excellence in those periods, in the late 18th century, in the early 19th century. The Nepalese trade with Tibet was very much good. The different goods like salt, let me say gold, have been traded between Nepalese people and Chinese people. And after the establishment of the People's Republic of China, China have had bilateral relations after that. And particularly Nepal's relations with China has been very smooth. Unlike India with conflicts and border disputes, there has no any disputes with border disputes. Though there was border dispute, it was settled between India and Nepal. But actually, China and Nepal. But China and Nepal have had very much of a good relation in terms of trade as well. After though Nepal and India have had a very good relations, economic relations in before, there was a certain gap between the Nepalese and Chinese trade, because if we convert the historic data into the present data, then the trade volume at that time between China and Nepal was very large compared to today. But Nepal has been trying to establish very much of a good economic relations and good economic trade relations with China. But one of the major barrier becomes the geography, because of the mountains between China and Nepal. It becomes very much of a challenge for Nepal and China to trade throughout the year. And so Nepal has been part of BRI as well, and which is anticipated to construct a very much of an ambitious railway network between India and China, which is anticipated to contribute to Nepalese economy and Nepal and China economic relations. But political relations have had also been very much nice between India and China. Many visits from Nepalese Prime Minister to China has been very frequent, and and later in the contemporary times also, in 2019, President Xi Jinping also visited China, and Nepal has been part of the BRI as well. And culturally as well, the Chinese culture and the culture of people living in the northern part of Nepal has been very similar. So yeah, so let me say that the Chinese Nepalese relation has been very nice, and the Chinese Indian relations has been very much deep rooted, but with ups and downs.
So how Nepal balances this geostrategic position for its development perspective, and how does Nepal balance India, which has been a top bilateral development partner for the country, with the emerging Chinese infrastructural projects or BRA, and in addition to this, what is Nepal's stance on the Indo-Pacific strategy?
Yeah, thank you. So, it is one of the very much a critical question, because Nepal, as a developing state, the development of infrastructures and the economic development and prosperity has been one of the very much pillars of Nepalese foreign policy, and one of the very much of a pillar or goal of Nepalese people and Nepal as a country as well. So it is very much critical. It has been very much critical. So Nepal has been, in my view, in my opinion, Nepal has been very much successful in maintaining the balanced relations between China and India. Though there have been some times that it has had the balance have had some turbulences, but Nepal, because of its independent foreign policy and because of its foreign policy, because of the developing foreign policy, after later in the 1980s and 1990s, the policy of equiproximity, or let's say the balanced the this the one of the most apparatus for balanced relations has been always been the foreign policy. Nepal has never tried to be close to one country, and Nepal has never tried to construct enmity with another, because one of the most fundamental principles of Nepal's foreign policy is that amity with all, enmity with none. So enmity with none. And because of this Nepal's adoption of foreign policy, that equiproximal foreign policy between the two neighbors, India and China, that Nepal tries to be equally close towards its neighbors. One of the most, let me say, crucial, or one of the most important device or tool for Nepal has been its foreign policy, while balancing its independent foreign policy, while balancing both India's and China's influence or geopolitical vulnerabilities for Nepal. And if we look at this geopolitical vulnerability of Nepal on and its impact on the development perspectives for Nepal, Nepal as a developing state, Nepal has had always been open towards its foreign aid, has been foreign assistances, but has been very much cautious towards its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. Though India has been one of the most largest bilateral donors, or bilateral one of the top countries which assist Nepal in its development and multilateral development and bilateral assistances, India has been very much of a dominant partner for Nepal in the previous days, because there has been very much of a huge development projects that has contributed Indian development project that have contributed to Nepal. There has been road constructed, the hydropowers have been constructed with the help of both with the collaboration of both India and Nepal, and certainly there have been some drawbacks of Indian foreign assistance towards Nepal. And some of the foreign assistances, some of the drawbacks is that India's it has been and it has been true because of the data and because of the reports that the Indian projects that start in that particularly start in Nepal do not complete in time. It is one of the main accusations that Nepalese people have towards India. And in later days, after the establishment of this BRI, Belt and Road Initiative by President Xi Jinping of China in 2013, and Nepal's participation in BRI after that, China has been one of the growing and leading development partners for bilateral development partners for Nepal, because millions of dollars and millions of rupees have been invested by China in Nepal and certainly in today's time, China has outrun, may I say, outrun India's influence, or India's capability, India's flow of, let me say, the foreign assistance or development assistance towards Nepal. China has been leading because of this BRI, and let me say, there's a project named Trans-Himalayan multi-dimensional connectivity network between China and Nepal to construct a very ambitious railway network between Nepal and India. Sorry, between China and Nepal, and certainly different projects, especially in the infrastructure, mainly in the hydropower development projects, or say even the railway connectivity. Chinese have been one of the most prominent and active donors and active bilateral assistants in terms of development partners in India in the present days. But it doesn't mean that Nepal has now the Chinese assistance is flowing in Nepal, and have to forget the Indian assistances in the pre-past. Indian assistances have been very much of a critical and equally helpful for Nepal in the previous days, and will keep on being very much crucial and critical and helpful for Nepal in the development projects or Nepal's development in the future days as well. But the competition of India and China in the development assistances for Nepal, as it can be clearly seen, but it is unfortunate for India that China has outrun India in terms of development assistances for Nepal in the previous 5 years, or let's say in the previous 5 to 6 years, because Chinese flow of foreign direct investment has been very much influential and crucial in terms of development of infrastructural projects, which makes it a very much a geopolitical competition as well. Let me say, the development aspects is not only the development aspects; it has a geopolitical rivalry. It has also created the geopolitical rivalry. The many say that it is a great Himalayan game between India and China in Nepal, because of these development assistances, because of the development assistances, and the soft power has been also increasing. The Chinese soft power has been also increasing in Nepal. Because the Indian influence, as I have already told, that because of the Indian Nepal deep rooted relations, we have a very much of a close relation with India, and the Indian culture and Indian language had been very dominant in India. But now the Chinese soft power has also been enhanced due to these development infrastructures, and the completion of these development infrastructures in time. The Chinese soft power has increased tremendously in Nepal as well. And in contemporary times, the Chinese help of this coronavirus vaccine, the varicella vaccines developed by the Sinopharm company in China, has been one of the very much soft power, and been very much crucial in terms of India and China in Nepal. So particularly Nepal has had Nepal have had benefited from this geopolitical rivalry in terms of economic and development perspectives. But the geopolitical rivalry between India and China had equally increased in Nepal because of these development imperatives as well. But I have to say it gladly that Nepal has been very much successful in maintaining this geopolitical rivalry in Nepal because of its independent foreign policy, and have had been successful in protecting its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. And because of these development projects as well, Nepal has been trying to shift the dependency of Nepalese economy from India towards China as well. So particularly in overall, the development perspective has played a crucial and critical role in increasing the geopolitical rivalry. But at the same time, Nepal has have benefited a lot in its development of its infrastructures, and for its economic prosperity. So not only so you have also added this question of Indo-Pacific strategy as well, and Nepal has been in the previous administration led by President Donald Trump, Nepal was dragged into this Indo-Pacific strategy as well, because of the growing U.S. China rivalry as well. Nepal has been very vulnerable in terms of geopolitics. The U.S. China rivalry, the growing U.S.-China rivalry and never-ending U.S.-China rivalry, may I say, it has affected Nepal's geopolitics tremendously as well. And one of the development assistances by Nepal, the MCC, the Millennium Corporation Challenge, which have had a very much a tremendous projects for Nepal in terms of roadway connectivity and the transmission lines for the electricity, for the transmission of the electricity, has not been passed through the parliament and has been under discussion in the parliament because of this geopolitical vulnerabilities. Because of this, Nepal doesn't want Nepalese let me say Nepalese people's choice, or Nepalese one of the most reiterated things in these days, that Nepal doesn't want to be a part of Indo-Pacific strategy. But this MCC challenge, this MCC projects for the roadways and transmission lines have been very much crucial, and it has been under debate whether to take those assistances from China, from USA or not, because of this geopolitical vulnerability. And it has been very much of a debate, because there has been some articles in the development pact between Nepal and US in terms of this MCC, which has a direct impact on its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. So it has been a very much of a debatable thing. But let me tell you frankly that Nepal-China relations has been up forwarded by this Nepal's participation in BRI. But similarly, if we talk about Indo-Pacific, Nepal is not ready yet to participate in the Indo-Pacific strategy. But certainly, the US-China rivalry has played its role in Nepal's geopolitics and made it more vulnerable. But certainly, I am certain that Nepal's foreign policy will balance this as well. But at the end, I would in the end of this question, end of this answer, I would like to add that this development imperative for Nepal has had brought geopolitical vulnerabilities, not only with India and China, but with also the extra regional actors, most focusedly from USA.
I'm going to ask a question about the Sino-Indian rivalry. How Nepal look at the Sino-Indian rivalry, and what is the Nepal reaction to the Sino-Indian rivalry? Does it affect Nepal the geopolitical situation, or?
Yes, certainly. Sino-Indian rivalry has been has been very long, because India and China have had gone wars several times in their history. I have already mentioned that before the establishment of uh, People's Republic of China, and before the independence of India, the relations between the China and India have not been that smooth or that good. They have always had rivalries, because they have already always had wars, because it can be termed through economic terms, or let's say political terms, or military terms, say what maybe. But the rivalry between the India and China has been very much ingrained in their relationship. And in the contemporary times as well, India and China have had very much turbulences in their relations, because of the Galwan Valley situation. Let's say in the present times, between the border dispute between India and China, or the Doklam issue, or the Chinese apps being banned in India. So it has always brought very much of a challenges between the two countries, the India and China. Though they though they are dependent on very much of other things, but politically or militarily, uh, they have had any smooth relations. The rivalry has been very long, and I think that the rivalry will go very far in the future as well, because there's no any bright future, that the India and China relations, or the India China disputes or rivalry will be very much smooth, because as a two growing economy, certainly the rivalry the certainly there is rivalry, and the rivalry can be a very much of a advantageous for both. But the rivalry in the border dispute, or certainly the military clashes, is not going to make their situations better. It will certainly make the relations between India and China, the clashes between them, the military clashes between them in the borders, will make them very much of a arch rival in the future. So yeah, being in between India and China, Nepal have had always been vulnerable to these rivalries or these disputes, because Nepal have had been always questioned on which side are you in this rivalry, in these disputes. But for your questions answer, let me say that Nepal has a very neutral foreign policy and non-aligned foreign policy. Nepal has been part of non-aligned movement from its very starting days, and Nepal has adopted the neutral foreign policy from very start of its foreign policy. So Nepal tries to stay neutral in these disputes, and Nepal believes in the peaceful settlement of these disputes, and urges both the countries to settle these disputes peacefully, in a peaceful manner. So it's not that Nepal doesn't speak when they have the rivalries, but Nepal speaks, but in a peaceful way, and urges both the neighbors to Nepal actually makes its stands clear that it is neutral. It is not taking sides on neither of India nor of China, and urges both the neighbors to actually settle these disputes very in a peaceful manner. And Nepal's foreign one of the most characteristics of Nepal's foreign policy is that, and commitment towards the two neighbors, is that Nepal will not allow any foreign country, or foreign agent, or foreign, let's say, anything to use Nepalese land and against India or China. Nepal is very much committed to that part also. So, having a very neutral foreign policy and a very non-aligned foreign policy, Nepal makes it clear that India and China should resolve these disputes in a very peaceful manner, through peaceful settlement of disputes, and doesn't take any sides, and it is non-aligned. It doesn't take any sides, and it is neutral, and adheres and as an adherent to the UN Charter and as adherent to the principle of world peace, Nepal always urges the neighbors to settle their disputes for regional stability, for the continental stability, and for the world peace as well. And Nepal believes that China and India are going to be the major powers in the future and wants them to collaborate, cooperate, but as well as compete, but in a very much of a good way, so that Nepal also could benefit and the whole South Asia and in a regional prospect, whole South Asia could benefit in that manner.
Do you think, Manish, do you think Nepal's geostrategic and geopolitics have implication on the regional power balance in South Asia?
Certainly, Nepal's geopolitical vulnerability and geostrategic position have its implication on the regional power structure as well. Because if we see South Asia, then India has always been dominant in South Asia. People don't try to use this dominant term while talking about India's role in South Asia, but India's role has been very much of a dominant in South Asia, and South Asian countries have been influenced by India's influence economically in somewhat political manner as well. Let me say it frankly. And certainly because of the homogeneous and very close connections between the South Asian countries, the Indian influence in the culture, religion has been certainly one of the factors as well. So India has been very much dominant in this region, and India have had influence among the small states in South Asia. If you talk about not only of Nepal, if you look at Bangladesh, look at Sri Lanka, or look at Maldives, or look at Afghanistan, though there's the very long Indian-Pakistan rivalry, but certainly this has the Indian influences has its own advantages, but also has some vulnerabilities, let me say. So if we talk about the Chinese, so if you talk about Nepal's geopolitical situation and regional power structure, Chinese have always thought Nepal to be the gateway to South Asia. So Nepal acts as a very much crucial actor for China to increase its influence in South Asia. So certainly the Nepalese geopolitical vulnerable situation and Nepalese geostrategic position has an implication in the whole South Asian region. If we look at Bangladesh, the Bangladesh-China economic corridor, and if you look at Sri Lanka, then Sri Lanka's influence, China's influence in Sri Lanka is at another level. And if you look at Maldives, and if you look at Afghanistan-China relations, China has been very much smarter in case for South Asia, and used, let me not say used, have employed their foreign policy through BRI the economic help towards the South Asian countries, not only for Nepal, and have certainly impacted the regional power structures, because the Chinese influence not only in Nepal, also in Bangladesh, also in Sri Lanka, have had implications, and certainly I can say for their country as well, they have had same situation like Nepal while balancing both China and India in their country as well. And I have already mentioned that being one of the crucial point for Chinese approach towards South Asia, Nepal has been always a critical point or critical actor. So yeah, certainly the geostrategic position of Nepal plays an important role for China and has a tremendous impact for India, for India looking at their dominant role in South Asia.
Does Nepal's geostrategic politics affect the geopolitical circumstances for the country?
Sorry,
Does
please would you like to?
Nepal's domestic politics affects the geopolitical circumstances for the country, for Nepal?
Yes, certainly. The domestic politics has a very much of a large impact in Nepal's geostrategic position, because if we look at Nepal's history, Nepal has always had a very much of a turbulent or unstable domestic politics. Nepal had gone through a decade-long civil, let not say civil war, the Maoist. There was a rebel. There was a let's say people's war started by the Maoist in Nepal. It was a decade long, and after that, Nepal went into the transition for the constitution making process. And before that as well, Nepal had a panchayat rule. Let me elaborate the panchayat rule, that it didn't allow the political parties to participate. And before that, it had the autocratic Rana rule. So looking at this Nepal's domestic politics, Nepal had some smooth domestic days as well, but uh, but uh, but at the same time, the domestic politics inside the country has been always turbulent. Has been always turbulent because of because of the various circumstances. I also already told that Nepal had faced the decade-long war, and later transition to the constitution making process. And after the promulgation of constitution in 2015, Nepal started its new journey. And Nepal ended the monarchy, and also transitioned to becoming a federal democratic republic of Nepal. So yeah, certainly, and it has been always unfortunate for Nepal that it has not got a stable government, because of the because of the various because of the political ambitions of the political leaders and the political parties inside Nepal. And inside Nepal, there has not been a stable government in Nepal. There has always been an unstable government in Nepal. So this instability in Nepal becomes a very much of a let me say opportunity for the actors actors to affect the geopolitics. So when there is when there is instability, the actors try to the regional the extra regional actors try to influence people, influence political parties, and influence political leaders. So in that way, the unstable domestic politics that Nepal has had a huge impact on its geopolitics. Whenever there has been instability, there has been the foreign interventions, or there we- the domestic politics can feel the shocks or feel the turbulences from the foreign actors foreign actors. Either it is from the closest neighbor, or Nepalese leaders have been very much playing the China card. When the Indian government, when the Indian side doesn't seem to support them, Nepalese leaders have had their chance to has always used their chance to use the China card. Have always been like that. So the instability inside the country, so the instability inside the domestic politics has certainly affected the geopolitics, because the instability has always invited the foreign players, the foreign actors, be its neighbors or the extra regional actors, to play in that manner. So yeah, the geopolitical vulnerability increases with Nepal's domestic political instability.
I'm going to ask the last question of the program.
Yeah.
How do you think the Nepal should view its geopolitical vulnerabilities and geostrategic locations in the future?
It becomes a very crucial question for Nepal. How to move ahead in this geopolitical situation, and how to in this geopolitical vulnerability, and how to manage its geopolitical situation or the geostrategic situation. So yeah, so one of the main aspect for Nepal would be its foreign policy. It should be foreign policy. The Nepal had have always the independent foreign policy, the neutral, the non-aligned foreign policy, the policy of equal proximity towards its neighbors, have been always adherent to the Charter of United Nations. The non-aligned movement have had always the neutral foreign policy, or is very much of a supporter of the world peace, the regional development, the regional cooperation. So one of the so relating to the previous question, one of the imperatives for Nepal to challenge to counter this geopolitical situation in the future would be to have a very much of a stable domestic politics. Importantly, the stable domestic politics would help Nepal a lot to balance these geopolitical vulnerabilities, and to manage and to gain better from its geostrategic situation. The domestic politics plays an important role. And another is the foreign policy and diplomacy. Nepal as a small state between the two countries, because of this relative size, as a very much of a the diplomacy has a very much of an important role to play in its geostrategic, in its geopolitical situation, because Nepal's diplomatic relations or diplomatic strategies or diplomatic tactics or diplomatic tools in the future days should be very much of a comprehensive and very much adaptive towards the future developments between China and India, towards the future development between USA and China, towards the future development in regional balances, or either be it in the Indo-Pacific or the South China Sea, Indian Ocean or the Pacific Ocean. Nepal's diplomacy and foreign policy should evolve, should develop in similar manner, looking at the prospects of future and its prospect of development in its neighborhood, in its near neighborhood, and conduct its foreign policy and plan its foreign policy and plan its diplomacy in that manner, so that it can manage its geopolitical vulnerabilities and use the geostrategic situation in that way. And furthermore, Nepal should understand, and Nepal as a developing state, and expecting neighbor countries to assist Nepal in its development projects and development imperatives, should understand that no lunches are free. No lunches are free. The economic assistances, the development assistances don't come in an easy way, because there are strings attached with the loans or the grants. So it is one of the most imperative, one of the essential quality for the people, for the leaders, to understand the development imperatives, development projects, along with the geopolitical vulnerability and geostrategic situation. The understanding should be very much of a in a parallel manner, so that Nepal's sovereignty, Nepal's territorial integrity, independence gets always protected, and always moves towards economic prosperity and development. So I would mention the domestic stability, the foreign policy, the comprehensive foreign policy and diplomacy with regards to the future development, and this the development imperatives of this, and moving towards in a parallel manner. So I think that these things might be helpful for Nepal in order to comprehend, and let me say, to adapt in its geopolitical development, because the geopolitics is not likely to be same. It was not same before, and it would not be same. Yes, the location might not change and will not change forever, and it will be always between India and China. But it is certain that there will be geopolitical changes, there will be geopolitical opportunities, there will be geopolitical challenges, and it is very important for Nepal to adapt in a similar manner, through its comprehensive, through its adaptive, and through its evolving foreign policy and diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manish, for great knowledge you provide us about the Himalayan countries. Very small but very important between two ASEAN giant, Nepal's. Thank you very much for also the colleagues and the fellows, those who are watching us until the end of the program. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more episodes about ASEAN Pacific affairs. See you in next programs.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me and let me speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Manish.